Why are Wall Street banks funneling $40 billion into the Chinese Communist Party via the Ant Group IPO? Hello, this is Robert Romano, Vice President of Public Policy with Americans for Limited Government, dailytorch.com. Hit the subscribe button. Today we're going to be talking about the Ant Group initial public offering that's going to be taking place in Hong Kong as well as Shanghai, and it could raise as much as $40 billion and be one of the largest IPOs in financial history. And U.S. banks are helping to underwrite this, including Citigroup, JPMorgan Chase Co, and Morgan Stanley. They'll be underwriting part of this, especially in the Hong Kong portion of this IPO. But I think it raises a lot of questions about whether the money is going to be funneled ultimately into the Chinese Communist Party and the Chinese military. It's also a move, I believe, with prominent U.S. banks. By doing the IPO in Hong Kong, I think they're legitimizing the takeover of Hong Kong by China. And with its national security law and the crackdown that's taken place there, President Trump has declared China in violation of the 1984 Sino-British Declaration Treaty, where autonomy for Hong Kong was not supposed to lapse until 2047 under the treaty. Instead, it's happening right now, and President Trump has already waived trade privileges for Hong Kong. Basically, they were getting exceptions to any tariffs that would go on China. Now the tariffs are being expanded to anything that's coming out of Hong Kong as well, because President Trump's saying, well, they're just going to try to get around our trade tariffs by putting the exports out of Hong Kong. And so we cut that off, and it's in direct response to the crackdown and the violation of this treaty. Now, the president is also withdrawing, and the Labor Department, federal employee retirement investments from China. This comes from the Secretary of Labor. It happened in May. It's been expanded to the Federal Retirement Board as well. And there's also a push. Americans for Limited Government is asking the Secretary of Labor in ERISA regulations that if state-owned Chinese companies are unsuitable investments for federal employees, well, that's probably true for private employees as well, and 401k investments and individual retirement account investments. Those are supposed to be safeguarded. The Labor Department's supposed to tell you what's a safe investment and what's not a safe investment, and if Chinese investments do not meet up with muster under the federal employee pension plan, then they probably don't measure up under the legal standard for ERISA investments as well. All of which calls into question why Wall Street is now expanding its operations in favor of the communists in China. I think that there's no question that Ant Group and Alibaba, which owns a third of Ant Group, is an organ of the Chinese Communist Party. Jack Ma, he's the co-founder and former executive chairman of Alibaba. He's a member of the Chinese Communist Party, and of course he is, says the New York Times. Now, he's no longer the chairman, but he handpicked his successor, Daniel Zhang, and I think that he's too going to be susceptible to this influence from the CCP, because in September 2019, China began officially assigning state officials to work at 100 companies, including Alibaba, as part of its party committee system to govern boardrooms. This is from Reuters. China to send state officials to 100 private firms, including Alibaba. Chinese top technology hub Hangzhou plans to assign government officials to work with 100 private companies, including e-commerce giant Alibaba, according to state media reports, and a move likely to raise concerns over the growing role of the state. The step underscores how Chinese government and party authorities are growing more deeply integrated into the private sector as its economy sputters amid the intensifying trade war with the United States. The city of Hangzhou, home to Alibaba Holding Limited, will designate government officials to work with 100 local companies in the eastern province of Zhejiang, the local government said on its website. Now, I think that this could be pretty intense and total control, because as Federica Russo reported that the Diplomat in December of 2019, characterizing these party committees that basically govern Chinese companies, that this is a method of extreme control. According to Russo, party committees represent an important mechanism through which Beijing's government expands its authority and supervision over organizations, creating different nuances of corporate governance with Chinese characteristics. A party committee is formed by a group of senior CCP members who are given a leadership position inside the halls of public and private companies operating in China. The legal pillars sustaining such committees' activity are marked in the 2012 Constitution of the Communist Party of China. In China's state-owned enterprises, the committee's leading position refers to its competence in setting the right decision, keeping in mind the big picture, and supporting the meeting of shareholders and board of directors to decide on major issues. Within private enterprises, however, it implements parties' policies and operates through the trade union and the Communist Youth League organization. According to Asian Corporate Governance Association reports, to understand what a party committee really does, we must take into account three main points. It makes the three important one large decisions, which means being responsible for the allocation of funds relative to important issues, cadres, appointments or dismissals, and new projects. The members of the party committees could also become part of the board of directors or the executive team, and the party unit must oversee the system of appointment of executives. That's pretty absolute control right there. It's a communist country. We shouldn't be surprised about state-owned and operated enterprises that are not transparent and may not abide by our pension laws, meaning anyone who invests in the initial public offering of Ant Group, which is owned by Alibaba, which is state-owned and operated by the Communist Party there. This could be one of the largest initial public offerings in history. Will be putting money directly into the hands of the CCP. And the same could really be said of any investments that you're seeing in China and Hong Kong, $381 billion of which, according to Treasury.gov, that tells you foreign held securities, that's both bonds and foreign corporate stocks that are accounted for there. A good chunk of the investment is also going to be into manufacturing, that $381 billion that is built using slave labor and child labor, according to the annual report from the U.S. Department of Labor that looks at the list of states that use either forced slave labor or child labor. And China uses child labor for textiles, it uses forced labor for artificial flowers, Christmas decorations, coal, footwear, garments, nails, and uses both for bricks, cotton, electronics, fireworks, and toys. In addition, there's concentration camps in Xinjiang province that are housing Uyghurs. Those are Chinese Muslims. And the Customs and Border Patrol is now blocking any slave labor goods, including agriculture, tomatoes, and cotton that come from that province, because there's a big problem with these concentration camps and the forced labor camps that they're using for, in this case, agriculture. The U.S. accuses China of using concentration camps against Muslim minority. And according to the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Asian and Pacific Security Affairs, Randall Shriver, he told a Pentagon briefing, quote, "The Chinese are using the security forces for mass imprisonment of Chinese Muslims in concentration camps." And he justifies the use of the term because, quote, "Given what we understand to be the magnitude of the detention, at least 1 million, but likely closer to 3 million citizens out of a population of 10 million in the province." So 30% of people in Xinjiang province are being imprisoned. Making matters worse, they harvest organs. China forcefully harvests organs from detainees. Tribunal concludes China's organ transplant trade is worth $1 billion a year, according to a tribunal. This story contains details that some may find distressing. Yeah, they're taking political prisoners, they're stealing their organs, in some cases while they're still alive. And this ChinaTribunal.com, independent tribunal into forced organ harvesting from prisoners of conscience in China. And it affects the Uyghurs, it affects the Falun Gong movement, it affects the Tibetans, and I think that we should be knowing about this. We should be knowing what we're investing $381 billion in securities, and it could be even more money now with this Ant Group IPO. It could be $30 billion, according to the Wall Street Journal. Some say it could be as high as $40 billion, and this is going to be underwriting the Communist Chinese Party, because the guy who founded Alibaba, which owns Ant Group, he's a member, of course, And I think that we need to take all this into consideration, the appalling human rights record that China has. And we shouldn't be involved, I believe, with investing in that. We should be using our influence, the fact that they want a trade deal with us. President Trump has gotten a trade deal, but he's also gotten tough with China and is putting tariffs on hundreds of billions of dollars of goods that typically get shipped to the United States. And maybe we need to ask the question if we should be shipping anything, if they're going to be using slave labor. They're going to be using child labor. Maybe we should have an opinion about that and decide that we abolished slavery in 1865. Maybe it's time that China abolish slavery too, and all of our trade partners. They shouldn't be using slave labor. And I'll leave you with the close here. What these Wall Street investment banks are doing by underwriting these Chinese IPOs with Beijing's appalling human rights record is beyond tacit consent. It is complicity. The money will support the CCP's agenda top to bottom. It legitimizes the takeover of Hong Kong, endangers Taiwan, and may even underwrite slavery and mass murder. History will one day look back on this moment and ask what they were thinking. That's the commentary. This is Robert Romano, Vice President of Public Policy with Americans for Limited Government, dailytorch.com. Hit that subscribe button, ring the bell for notifications, and have a good day.